Antigravity is already amongst the most powerful AI coding tools on the planet. But the thing that 99% of people don't realize is that you're only using about 20% of its actual power. Because the value, it's not in Antigravity itself, but it's when you connect it to thousands of apps using something that we call MCP. Model Context Protocol. So you can now build systems that are 10 times more powerful than anything that you've ever built. And so in this video, I'm going to show you exactly what an MCP actually is, how you can start using MCPs in Antigravity, and finally, I'm going to be making a full stack app connecting Antigravity to your N8N automations. And in case you don't know who I am, my name is Michele, and I've scaled my own AI agency to 6 figures in 14 months. I've worked with over 50 businesses across multiple industries, and I also taught 20,000 people in the process, all starting with zero technical knowledge. With that being said, let's dive in. All right, so first thing first, what an MCP is just a way for you to connect to different apps without you having to connect to them individually every single time. Okay, so let's say you have an AI assistant, which in this case would be Antigravity. You talk to the AI agent there. You give a prompt that says, hey, can you make a workflow in N8N? Now, what that does is it then talks to the MCP hub, which is connected to N8N, is connected to Gmail, Calendar, Outlook, Google Drive, Slack, all these different softwares, and it will take action on those softwares on behalf of you. Now, why is that powerful? Is because previously for us to use automations, we had to use the AI assistant, and then we had to skip and we had to connect the AI assistant to the actual software itself individually, and it will take us a lot of time, especially when you want to connect it to thousands of different apps. And so now with this MCP hub, what you have is the ability to send a request and the ability to then connect to hundreds of apps just within Antigravity itself using its MCP, so you can take action on all the softwares that you want. Now, when you get into Antigravity itself, the way to find your MCPs is to go to the top right. You'll see the 3 dots, and then you get to the MCP servers. As you can see here, we have an MCP store. Think of this as the Apple Store, right? You have the Apple Store with all the different apps, but instead of apps, we have softwares. And so you can connect the Antigravity to Firebase, to BigQuery, to GitHub, Neon, Stripe, Redis, MongoDB, Notion, all these different softwares, so that when we actually build a web app or some sort of software with Antigravity, it can automatically talk to the software if you wanted to, okay, without you having to connect it itself. Now, there's only one problem, because per se, if I go to Notion here and I press in the software, you will see that on the left-hand side, it will give me a step-by-step tutorial on how to actually configure Notion. And I would have to press install, and I would need an API token, which I can then get from Notion. The problem here is that N8N does not have the same thing. So if I search N8N here, nothing actually shows up. And so what we have to do here is configure it in a custom way. So you want to press manage MCP servers, and on the left hand side you will see view raw configuration. So it's config means configuration, and let's press this here. And now what you need is a JSON with the actual API key with all the credentials of N8N, so that you can speak to N8N automatically through Antigravity's MCP. There's a lot of words right there, but bear with me, I'll walk you through exactly how to do it. So the first thing you want to do is you want to go to N8N right here, go to your cloud account, you want to go down to the settings, go to the MCP access, and then here you want to go to access token. You want to refresh your access token, and you want to take the JSON, the one right here, which you can copy. Make sure not to share with anyone, or else they will have access to your N8N account. And you will paste it back here. And always make sure that you press save. Now, once you press save, you want to go back to the MCP, manage MCPs here. You can refresh, and now you can see that you've just connected N8N to Antigravity. And as you can see here, it has 3 different actions. It has the action of searching the workflows. So it can go inside our account and search for things. It can execute workflows, which is exactly the one that we're going to be using today, which is actually triggering a workflow. So starting an automation in N8N using our apps. And then finally, it can get workflow details. So it can get specific information about a certain workflow, okay? And for security reasons, if you want to turn one off and turn the other on, you can simply do that. But for this case, I'm going to turn everything on because I'm pretty much going to use all of them. And now that we have N8N connected, we're now able to make an app that can connect to our automations. So I'm going to press out, close this, and then I'm going to go back to the agent, and we can start building the app. So the first thing I want to do is I want to open a folder, because remember that every single time that you work with Antigravity, maybe on an app or a software or some vibe coded dashboard, you want to make sure that you make a folder in your MacBook or in your computer so that it starts storing all the different folders there, all the files, whether it's code, whether it's just prompts, so that you can always come back to it later on. It's sort of like a project. Each app has its own project. And so we want to press open folder. I'm going to make a folder inside here, but you can just make it in your own computer. I'm going to press new folder and put N8N automation and press create and press open. So now what happens is that whenever we make the actual software itself and we have to store prompts or code or any sort of material to get us ahead when making the software, it can store everything right there. So then I can close it and then open it back up. So the example of today is we're going to be making a dashboard where we can drop invoices in that dashboard And then it will send the invoice directly to our automation in N8N to be able to do the next steps. So logically, when you think about building something like this, the first step is not actually making the software, but it's getting the backend of the software, which is the automation in N8N. All right, so right here, I have the workflow inside of N8N, which is actually something that I built in one of my previous videos on YouTube. You can check it out up here. It's called an invoicing parsing system. But essentially, we will connect our app in Antigravity to this workflow in N8N. Okay, so we'll have a dashboard. We drop the invoices. And then this webhook, it's called a webhook, which is triggered whenever something happens within a certain server. We will instruct Antigravity to say, hey, when I drop the invoice in the dashboard, I want you to directly send it over to the webhook in this workflow right here. And it's able to do that because of the MCP. Let me go right here. And the webhook, the way that it would work is that we feed the URL of the webhook to our Antigravity app. So we say, hey, build a dashboard. Whenever I drop the invoice, send the invoice over to this URL, right? Because the webhook is just a URL that receives information from the web. And so we're going to copy this and then paste it in our prompt when we tell Antigravity to do the app, which we'll then use to be able to go to the next steps. Now, make sure this is in post method, because then it's able to actually receive the invoice. If you put it in get, it's not able to do it. And then finally, respond. So we want to use the respond to webhook node, because let's say I didn't have this, then I would drop the invoice into the system and it will say, yeah, all good, but I wouldn't know if the automation finished. So this way, what it does is that it sends the invoice here. It then waits until the whole automation is finished to then send a signal back, which is this one right here, and waits until it goes until the end to be able to send a signal back. And then what we do here is we use the extract from file. So we extract all the text from the PDF, which will then go all the way to the information extractor, which will extract the full name, the total amount, the invoice date, the invoice number, client email, client address, payment status, payment method, currency, line item as well, which will add everything to our Google Sheet database, which looks like this with all the details here. And then we use an AI agent to be able to craft an email to our billing team using the details of the invoice, informing them, hey, we've just received an invoice. It has been processed, so you're good to go. And then finally, we send a response to the actual dashboard itself in, the one that we built in Antigravity, saying that everything was successful. Now, the reason why we're focusing on N8N first before Antigravity is because we're working backwards. To be able to make this whole thing happen, we have to build the automation in N8N, and then be able to connect our dashboard that we're building to the actual workflow. So when I go back here, it's actually very simple to build some sort of dashboard. And the way that I like to think about things is asking myself, okay, when I'm building this app, what is it that I need to be able to build this app? For example, for this dashboard itself, I obviously want my brand guidelines to be part of the process when Antigravity makes the actual dashboard. And so the first thing I do is I want to add a file here, and I want to name this brand guidelines.md. MD stands for Markdown, because yes, we have the workflow in N8N that's waiting to be triggered by this dashboard, but also now we have the actual dashboard that we want to build inside of Antigravity, and I want Antigravity to use my brand guidelines when making the dashboard. So here I have the prompt for the brand guidelines. I'm going to press File, Save. And the brand guidelines just means the brand name, the logo, the colors, the typography, the UI elements, all the different things about my brand that I want inside the dashboard. Because I realized that when it comes to colors and things, if you leave it up to Antigravity, it doesn't do the best job. That's why you want to be more strict with the actual kind of prompts and things you tell it to do. Because remember, all these tools are very, very good, but they're only as good as the prompts you give them, because they're instructions. So if your instructions are bad, then your output will be bad. All right, so now it's going to be the time for us to be able to make the prompt. And for the prompt itself, I'm going to say, make a dashboard where I can upload invoices. Once I upload the invoice into the dashboard itself, it then sends the actual invoice over to the webhook in our N8N workflow, which is called Antigravity Invoices, because that is the name of the actual workflow. So make sure the name matches so that it knows it can search through the actual workflow. That's the name of the workflow. There you go. Important that when you are making the dashboard, make sure to follow the brand guidelines.md document that I left in the project. I want to make sure that the name is exactly with the spelling in capital letters to make sure that it doesn't trip up. And finally, here is the webhook URL. I'm going to go back to the workflow. I'm going to go here. I'm going to test this. I'm going to copy this and make sure you save this and so on. So it's all good and ready to go. And when I go back, I can paste it here. And then I can choose the planning mode, because this task right here is not something fast that it can execute directly, but it's something that it needs to take a little bit more time, just because it's also using the MCP and it's writing code for the dashboard, and it's going to test everything together. Now, in terms of the actual model itself, you could be using Gemini 3 Pro. I honestly don't really care about the actual overall looks of the whole dashboard as long as it works and it's using my brand guidelines. I'm fine, which is why I'm using Cloud Opus 4.5, because it's better at coding. It's better at the actual coding part and making sure the backend all works together, which is exactly what I care most about, because obviously I'm connecting it to our automations and I want to make sure everything flows together. So I'm going to then press run, and this is now going to execute on everything. One thing I also did here is I added the ID of the workflow. because sometimes what I found is that the name itself is not enough to be able to, I guess, find the workflow. So now, as you can see, it's calling the MCP tool to be able to get the workflow ID, and it's using the actual ID of the workflow to find the workflow. And one problem that I haven't seen anybody actually go through on a video, but that you will encounter as you get along with Antigravity, is the actual rate limits. So as you can see here, there's actually a notification saying that the agent terminated due to error. I usually just press retry and keep going with the agent because Google doesn't actually specify the context length, which is how long you can have a conversation with the actual agent for, how many conversations you can have. It doesn't specify the exact number. I just keep going until it basically stops, right? It hasn't stopped for me yet totally, where I had to wait a few days, but it's going to be something that you should be expecting if you're working with the software quite a lot. And you don't have the max paid subscription as well. As you can see here, it made the implementation plan, which is a plan of action that Antigravity makes when it needs to actually build the software. And it's going to make a task list, which is a list of tasks that it needs to do to be able to get from point A, which is where we are now, to point B, which is the full dashboard, it working, verified, and good to go. And that's one of the good things about Antigravity that I found that worked really, really well. It's its ability to think through how it's going to structure the system before it actually structures it. Because then it allows us to be able to see, to verify as well, if the steps are laid out in a correct way. And we can always come back to it and comment on the tasks or comment on the implementation plan and tell it to change a few things in case we wanted to. So as you can see here, it basically finished all the tasks apart from testing the complete workflow. So now what it's doing is that it's actually testing the dashboard itself to see if it works. And as I can see here, it opened up the dashboard, which is now being tested. And the blue borders is basically just so you know that it's walking through the whole process. But as you can see, it's now using my brand guidelines. As I mentioned, JM Solutions, blue, everything, works well here. Finally, it gave me a link that I could open to be able to access the dashboard itself. And we have a new page as well with the walkthrough summarizing the whole kind of testing process that it went through as well. I'm going to press the link here. It's going to take me to the dashboard itself. I'm not going to go to my workflow here. I'm going to go to the webhook and I'm going to press listen for test event. So in my workflow, I'm going to press execute workflow. So now it's testing. So it's actually receiving the data from the dashboard. And I'm going to be using a invoice that looks like this with the invoice number, invoice date, status, payment method, client name, email address, the description as well, and the total amount. I can then drop the invoice over here. I can press upload invoice. And as you can see, this is uploading the invoice. So it's running the automation inside our N8N because we give it the webhook, right, which is using. It's then adding the details over to a Google Sheet, which I can see here, John Doe, client address, description, amount, invoice date, status, and payment method. And then it's also using the AI agent to be able to craft an email, which is sent to our inbox. As I can see, I get the email, which looks like this. We received the invoice number 2026-00187, John Doe, dated this, total amount. And we also have the link to our Google Sheet database in case our billing team, wants to check out the whole dashboard. And if I go back to the actual dashboard, I can see that we have the fake invoice, which was recently uploaded, which is green, which means that everything was successful. And so now we have this dashboard that we can continuously use to be able to drop invoices here to then be able to trigger the actual workflow in N8N right here. Now, one important thing is that when you are activating this and you want to set this live, you want to do two different things. The first thing is you want to make sure that this is hosted in GitHub and it will then be launched live in a software called Vercel, right? Where you can actually host the software itself to be able to use it all along 24/7. And on this side, you want to make sure that you publish this workflow, publish this. And when you publish this, you can go into the webhook and make sure you turn this from test URL to production URL. So you can copy this and then prompt the actual Antigravity here to say, hey, instead of using the webhook that I gave you before, can you change it and use this one here now? An alternative thing that you could do is actually go in the code itself, which has the webhook, and just remove the test. So it's then going to use the new webhook that you give it, which is a production URL, in the production mode. And if you want the full prompt that I gave the actual Antigravity, plus the brand guidelines and also the workflow that I used of today, you can check it out in the second link down below. In the classroom section, you can go to the templates vault and you'll be able to see the latest video, which would be Antigravity. It will be a new video there with a link right here. Bear in mind that not everybody gets in, so please put some thoughts into your answers and I'll see you on the inside. And so now you know how to connect N8N to Antigravity to make sure that the systems that you build are 10 times more powerful. Now this right here is a very easy use case and it's just the tip of the iceberg to the things that we could actually be doing when it comes to these actual systems. So I hope it gave you some use cases that you can start to think of and start building when you are building automations in N8N and also dashboards in Antigravity. And if you want to work with me one-to-one to be able to start and scale your own AI agency and actually monetize these skills that we're talking about in these videos, then I left the first link down below. It's a full video where it walks through the details of the program. And if it sounds like a good fit, then feel free to apply. And if you want to dive deeper into N8N, definitely check out this video up here, where it's a short tutorial of 12 hours where I take you from a real beginner in N8N to a complete master in building automations and AI agents. With that being said, I hope you found value from this video and I'll see you in the next one.